The impact on design on our lives has great meaning, and in particular with our guest today, Damian Farrell from Damian Farrell Design Group and his Damian on Design, joining us on the Lucy Ann Lance Show, 1290 WLBY. How did you encounter Robert Adams?
Through our mutual friend and great supporter of the arts, John Kotarski. John just has a finger on everything going on in this town with art and sculpture and everything that's happening right in design, and he made this connection for us. So a couple of weeks ago I got to go to Robert's studio and witness what we're going to talk about today.
Robert Adams is Assistant Professor of Architecture at the University of Michigan, Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning, where he teaches and coordinates graduate courses in design and construction. But what you are doing is incredible.
Isn't it?
Describe where you're located, and then we're going to get into this project.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for the invitation, Damian, to join you, and thanks to you and Lucy Ann. This is a real pleasure and opportunity. So I've been in Ann Arbor for 10 years. I'm an associate professor at Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning, and as you just asked, we have a studio located in a strip mall, a Maple Village Mall here in Ann Arbor. It's on the west side, next to Plum Market, where Plum Market's located. And the Secretary of State.
And that's Adams and Gilpin
Adams
studio.
and Gilpin, right.
And that's Dawn Gilpin.
Dawn Gilpin is my partner. She also teaches at the College of Architecture.
I guess for a lot of people, they may have seen one of your designs and not realized it.
Right. We just recently installed a grocery cart corral at Plum Market. So as you come into Plum Market store, if you ever go there, when you grab your grocery cart, you'll be entering this new design space that we just installed 3 weeks ago.
I've never seen anything like it in my entire life. Describe it.
The cart corral is part of a larger research idea, and so generally in my own research I'm interested in the threshold between public space and institutions, and whether that's like a parking structure going into a theater, or the bus stop going into a children's hospital, or even going from the sidewalk into a grocery store, although a grocery store is maybe a different type of institution. This idea is that when you move from these general spaces into specific spaces as a consumer to buy something, for example, there's a moment where this piece of architecture, or piece of art as you've called it, intercepts that experience. And just for a moment you're in this other kind of space that is blue, it's made out of sheet aluminum, it's about product display, and then you go inside and you're buying.
But also it takes things, we're so used to seeing carts just jammed into each other, right, and parked on a concrete floor in a concrete block environment, any big box you go into. Here all of a sudden these carts are lined up, but they're at an angle to each other. There's a dynamic between them. And then there are these different materials and these colors. And I've sat there and watched people's reaction. They walk up, they're in a hurry, they go up, they grab their cart, and then they stop just for a second, they look around, and some of them sort of shake their head and move on, but at least they've experienced something. It's done something to them. And then when they come out, if you watch them, they come out and they look at it again. They're not parking their carts, but they come out, and as they're going past it, they turn and look at it, and there is this sense of curiosity that in the time I sat there for about an hour, at least 50% of the people came out. They don't know what it is, they don't know why, but they're curious.
Who knew you could have that public art experience at the grocery store?
Yeah, exactly.
But this goes even beyond that. Your work, Robert Adams, has particular meaning to you and your family, and this notion of public spaces and in context with how we move through them. Share your story, if you would.
Sure. Personally, one of the life-transforming things for ourselves has been muscular dystrophy. So in my family, we have muscular dystrophy, which impacts myself and also our daughter. And through this, we've rethought our role as designers, our role as educators, teaching in architecture, relative to disability culture, or what's called disability culture, disabled persons. And one might think the word disability is a contentious term, which we could go into if you like, but I think it's the right term for now to talk about the identity of people that are often marginalized within our culture at large. And so I think part of the thinking in the work is how do you create higher degrees of participation for all types of people in civic life, everyday life. And that could be going to the grocery store, that could be going to school, that could be going to work. So I think this is really part of the primary agenda in the work is the intersection of design, architecture, and disability culture.
And what you've done, I think, is utilize that disability in a way that I've never seen anyone do before.
Yeah, I think there's one just very quick, very important thing here. You know, as architects we design to codes, right? And there are barrier-free design codes to enable all of this to happen better. But really those codes are the minimum, right?
Right, if you're just doing compliance-based design, you're fulfilling the absolute minimum standard.
You're making it the best that you can at a minimum level for someone to move in and out of a space, use the space, and so on. This starts to take something that is terribly, terribly important and elevates it.
What is the Asclepius Machine?
Right, the Asclepius Machine. First, Asclepius. Everyone knows the symbol of Asclepius. So when you see the back of an ambulance, you'll see Asclepius' symbol, which is the staff or the stick, wrapped by a couple of serpents or snakes. And that's the ancient symbol of Asclepius. So Asclepius was the Greek god of the medical arts and healing. And so I've designed this project called the Asclepius Machine. And in short, the Asclepius Machine is a wheelchair accessible ramp. It's also a ramp for anybody. Someone in a walker, someone pushing a child in a stroller, somebody on crutches, somebody skateboarding, somebody walking, jogging. It's a public ramp, but it's really biased towards disabled persons, and in particular people with musculoskeletal disorders, but also anybody with any mobility issues. The machine part of it is that unlike a standard wheelchair ramp, which might be ADA compliant or has to be ADA compliant, made out of concrete, steel, galvanized railings, galvanized steel railings, and then put to, let's say, the side of the building entrance, or at worst by the loading dock, where you have to go past dumpsters and trash bins and these tertiary spaces.
Yep.
The Asclepius Machine is really about making a piece of urban theater that's placing disabled persons and let's say the infrastructure around that in a more responsive and hopefully I think more responsible way relative to civic institutional interfaces.
As I look at your prototype, which you're building over in that strip mall where Plum Market is on Ann Arbor's
We have a
west.
very large simulation model that's designed for testing purposes right now, and the idea is to build 3 versions of this thing. One would be a version here in Ann Arbor. Another one would be a version at a high-profile national site. And then the third, I'd love to build a lightweight version that you could put on a truck or put into a container, and you could ship it around to different venues, like a veterans conference, a disabled persons conference, a motorcycle rally, a state fair, something like that.
How wonderful to have something that you could take remotely
Right,
and still have that experience.
Right.
So you have to explain to people, though, how this ramp, for lack of a better word, this Asclepius Machine, how is it different than a traditional ramp that one would use if they have a disability?
Let's talk a little bit about what's available for disabled persons in terms of experiences.
Okay.
And again, in the back of my mind is I'm always thinking about our daughter, really.
Yeah. She's, what, 17?
So, almost 17.
And she utilizes a wheelchair?
She uses a powered wheelchair.
Okay.
Yeah. But more broadly, I'm thinking about disability culture at large.
Okay.
So it's not specific to her, but to be sure, she's the primary motivation in thinking about the work. The machine part of the project works as follows. As you have to imagine you're going up a ramp, going from a parking lot or maybe the sidewalk into a building. As you move up this ramp, there's a series of lights that automatically turn on based on your motion, so your path is always lit. There's sounds in this space. I wouldn't say it's not quite music in a melody or a song like, but there's a series of frequencies that people with different types of hearing impairments can dial into, vibrations that are in the surfaces of this thing. So it starts to speak to or respond to people with a variety of disabilities. Halfway through the ramp, there's a loop, and the ground of this thing actually wraps up around you in the same way that a roller coaster makes a loop, or certain roller coasters make a loop. And that's an idea of trying to strip weight out of disability culture. So for somebody who's in a 300-pound steel wheelchair, who maybe is just coming out of the war theater, possibly with a lower spinal cord injury, extremely fit, but now has this new life to live in a wheelchair, is really grounded to the ground itself.
Yeah.
And so the idea of this loop is just for a moment, psychologically, perceptually, you begin to take the weight out of the experience for that person.
As you go in, it draws your eye up and over,
Yeah, right.
backwards. So, and that's a vertical loop. We should explain that because we have listeners. Not a horizontal loop.
Right.
So
In-
the roller coaster analogy.